Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. So, what's been going on in the world of the 2A? You know, the same negative Nancy bullcrap. It was cool to see David Hogg get owned by Lily Tran. Take a look at Colion Noir's video on that. I'm not going to go into that, but basically, David Hogg, Davey, as Tim from Military Arms Channel likes to say, because he's calling him out, basically couldn't stand up to why our government couldn't be or wouldn't ever be tyrannical. So let's get back to the reloading conversation. So one of the biggest things you can ever do is bullet selection. Whether you're looking at self-defense or you're looking at hunting. So tonight I'm going to focus on hunting rounds. When we talk about bullet selection, let's look at the rifle first. So what kind of rifle are you using? Okay, so what are its capabilities as far as ballistics? If you look at a Magnum, the ballistics are dramatically different, and the capabilities of the round are dramatically different compared to, say, like an .06 or a 5.56. So you need to look at what the rifle is actually capable of. A lot of people will buy rifles thinking that they're going to get sub-MOA with them, but are you actually capable of doing that, one? And two, is your actual rifle capable of doing that? Sometimes a lot of people will take the press for a gun, especially a cheaper gun, and the barrels aren't made to the quality spec you need to get that extreme accuracy you're looking for. The cartridge. So does it have sufficient muzzle energy for the caliber? Okay. So if you take this look at the 308 versus the 30-06, while they can on paper do similar things, the reality is the .06 has more cartridge capacity and can do more things. You can use different bullets with the .06 to get more out of the round, and that translates to more accuracy. And when you're reloading, that also translates to bullet selection. What kind of bullets are you going to use for this particular cartridge? One of the funny things about this that I've noticed, and it's weird, I've always looked for velocity when it came to reloading. That's what my dad had always cued me in on. And velocity matters, but accuracy matters more. And what I mean by that is precision. There's a difference between accuracy and precision. Accuracy is getting it into the pickle barrel. Precision is choosing exactly where in the barrel it's going. And I'm more a fan of getting precision out of a round than I am getting accuracy. And bullet selection matters here, because what I've noticed with the 308 specifically is that a 165 or a 168 grain is way more accurate, even though you lose velocity. You gain a little bit of energy when it actually connects, but you lose muzzle energy, or muzzle velocity, that is, when you're loading for it. But they're a hell of a lot more accurate with 168 grain and 165 grain, and that translates to the 270 even, that you'll see that they're more accurate at longer distances, and that's because they tend to buck the wind better. Hunting style. So when you're hunting, what kind of hunting do you do? Do you stand in a stand? Back east, this is a big thing. In the west, not so much, but we would call that point hunting here, because in the west, we hunt from points more than we do tree stands, because in a lot of places, in New Mexico specifically, our trees aren't big enough to put a stand in, and usually we don't put a stand in like you do back east. You glass and stalk. Now, this is more like how we have to hunt in New Mexico. When we say glass and stalk, we're looking at an extreme distance and stalking our game to get to it. Unless you're a road hunter in New Mexico, you tend to do this type of hunting the most, where you're looking at an area, seeing where there could be deer, or you are watching deer or elk or whatever game you're hunting, and you're trying to figure out how to approach them so you can start stalking them to get a good shot on them. Do you block and drive? So this is something else. So when we go back to New Mexico way of hunting versus a stand hunting, and even back east they do this, where you have people driving the animals to a person in a stand or a person on a point. We do this in New Mexico and in Colorado because it gives you set ranges. You know what to aim at if you're on a point or in the stand. But if you're stalking or if you're actually driving, your shots are going to be kind of snapshots. The animal's going to jump up. It's going to run. Are you capable of taking that shot? Is the round capable of putting enough kinetic energy there and have the velocity to reach what you need it to do right there and give that potential kill when you need it at those particular ranges and distances? So I've talked about this before. Accuracy versus precision. So there are two types of loading that I've found. Actually, I would say there's three. There's one for volume, where all you care about is how many rounds you're churning out, and they have kind of an acceptable accuracy, versus a precision loader. A precision loader is going to load a lot less because they're going to pay a lot more attention to the charge, the bullet seating, every step of the reloading process to make very accurate rounds, because they're worried about, I'm worried about more specifically, worried about exactly all the steps that I can take out of the loop and make this this round specifically as precise as I possibly can. You know, if I'm carrying 20 rounds on me, I want them to be the most precise and best rounds possible to engage whatever target I'm looking at. Bullet shape and construction. So let's talk about that. You know, there's a lot of talk nowadays about ballistic coefficient, and there's a lot of talk about, you know, construction like nozzler partitions, partition bullets in general, and bullet retention and energy transfer. Well, this all has to do with the bullet construction. And each bullet construction is actually pointed at a particular purpose. For instance, a spire point. This is a bullet that has a lead nose, or technically speaking, even the ones with a plastic nose. Those are considered spire points. But what you're trying to do is reduce the ballistic coefficient. And this, without going into a lot of detail, and I've tried to do this before with ballistic coefficient, but without you having ballistic calculators and a lot of diagrams to understand it, the best way to put this is how a bullet flies through the air matters, right? So ballistic coefficient is actually tied to the best ballistics or the best aerodynamics possible for a projectile to fly through the air. Okay? But that doesn't necessarily reflect the use case of the bullet. Case in point, I used round nose, 170 grain round nose in my 8mm .6, but I'm looking for penetration and looking for that absolute kill when it comes to putting down an elk, specifically with my 8mm .6. But what do I get for having a round nose? Usually what I get is accuracy to a degree, not necessarily precision, but I get penetration. And there's something to be said about this. If you're using a heavy a bullet specifically and you're hunting a heavier bodied animal, you need to get to those deeper innards to actually, you know, their vitals, to hit them, kill them humanely and cleanly. Now, what I've noticed, and this is all anecdotal, is that a round nose tends to transmit that instant energy transfer. Okay, I've hit animals at 300-500 yards with an 8mm .6 and with a 30-30, because those are only two rounds that I ever use that are round nose. And it seems to transmit the energy directly on the target, and we get a clean, humane kill 100% of the time. You know, I've not ever hit an elk or a deer with my 8mm .6 and had to worry about chasing it too far. The energy transfer was perfect. Bullet retention was pretty good. Now, when we say bullet retention, what does that mean? This is a buzzword in ballistics and a buzzword when bullet selection happens. And what we mean is the weight of the bullet is as close to the original weight as it was when you loaded it as when you retrieved it after it's been fired through the target. Okay? What does that mean is it's translating all of its energy the best it can to its target. This is a big thing for hunters. The distance you're shooting at the target. I started hunting with a 7mm Mauser and an 8mm Mauser. And when I started hunting in more open areas like around Cuba, New Mexico, I realized my ranges opened up from the average range of being about 200 yards at its max to about 6 or 7 at its farthest, at where you feel like you're going to make a humane kill. And this is where I started talking to gunsmiths because I couldn't afford, buying a brand new rifle, and neither could my dad at the time. So we started looking at the 8mm AUG-6. This gave me gave me the ballistics I needed to shoot those long ranges or longer ranges and kill my game humanely. You take a 5.56. So my brother Rick, happy birthday by the way, he likes to shoot coyotes, and he's pretty good at it. Now he's working on a gun right now, an AR-15. With a 24-inch barrel, and he wants to be able to hit coyotes at 500 yards. Now, I have no doubt he can do this, but when you're using lighter rounds with the 5.56, at 500 yards, what you'll notice is that you're getting more of an area effect than you are actually getting precision, and that has to do with the round itself. Now, if you take something like a 270 with a 90-grain bullet, at 500 yards, you're still in the golden area where it's going to have the range in the translation of energy on your target. That said, you're going to have a lot more powder, you're going to have a lot more other things that you're going to have to deal with that particular round to make it as awesome as it could be, and that doesn't translate just to the 5.56, it translates to the .308, translates to the AUG-6, translates to the 300 Win Mag. It translates to every caliber. Is that at what range are you shooting at matters. If you're shooting at 1,000 yards all the time, you need to have that energy transfer that is enough to humanely kill your target or to have effect on your target, as if you're shooting at 300 yards or 200 yards. This type of thing is part of the calculation you have to do and part of what you do in bullet selection. So let's continue down that list. The bullet shape and construction. So I kind of led down that path when I'm talking about spire points, OTM rounds or LEM rounds. It depends the brand, whoever makes them. What we're talking about is how they are shaped and what they do and how they fly ballistically. A round nose is going to lose velocity points. So you're not going to get the velocity you would out of a spire point. And its ballistic coefficient is going to be dramatically different. Well, not dramatically, but quite a bit different than if it was a spire point, because it's not going to have that perfect aerodynamic profile we're looking for when we're choosing bullet projectiles. The game you are pursuing. So this matters again. If you're hunting rabbits, you're hunting coyotes, you're hunting deer or elk or moose, it matters what type of bullet construction you're using when you're hitting them. If they're, like I said, if you're a heavier gamed animal that you're hunting, or if you're hunting heavier gamed animals, you need something that's going to get through the hide, the fat, and the muscle and the bone potentially to get to its vitals. And is the bullet capable of doing that? If you look at something like the VMAX, the VMAX is a very cool round and it's very ballistically great. Until you start looking at those heavier bodied animals, it's not designed for that. It's designed for putting as much energy into the target as soon as it can, dumping it as soon as it can, which means it's not going to get as much penetration. So a VMAX wouldn't be the ideal choice for like an elk or a bear or a moose, but it may be the perfect choice for coyote or any other smaller game you're looking at. And that matters. The same thing goes with if you're looking at self-defense rounds for a rifle like the 5.56. A VMAX may be one of those perfect rounds you're looking for not killing little Susie down the street, because it dumps all of its energy in its first target it hits. That said, you're going to lose some barrier penetration because it's not going to... it's going to destroy itself. The construction of the bullet is made in such a way that it's going to disintegrate itself as it hits the target and penetrates the target. That's great for what I just said. If you're engaging a target, you're hitting that one thing right there for self-defense, or you're hitting that one animal and you're not hitting a tree limb, or you're not worried about brush or anything else to break through, to have the projectile break through, or thick hide to get through, for it to actually do the damage it's intended to do. So you have to look at the bullet construction there, and then you have to look at the habitat and terrain you hunt. So this speaks volumes to me, because I have come from this area where in northwest New Mexico, it depends on where you hunt. But in general, your average shot's about 100 to 300 yards. Okay, 300 being the longest you're going to get before it gets too thick. The terrain, the trees, the brush are going to get too thick for you to actually make an effect on target and the animal has actually escaped. But then you go down south, just an hour and a half away from me, and the area is mostly sagebrush open flats. So with that area, what are you going to be able to do? And are you going to be able to reach those distances with enough kinetic energy to make an effect on the target you're intending to put the animal down? Okay. And lastly, the angles. Okay. So this is a controversial topic. Okay. And what I mean by that is that you'll hear a lot of boomer lore around if you hit a windshield at a certain angle that a bullet will deflect, and there's some truth to that. Okay? There's also some truth to that there are new modern bullet constructions that bullet deflection is not as much of a problem. If you look at something that is made to punch through body armor, for instance, it's not going to deflect as much as, say, something like a silver tip 30-06 or 270 round. I've heard stories, and I've heard a lot of anecdotal stories of people using bronze or silver tip bullets, soft points, hitting a rib on an animal like a deer, and it deflecting and not doing enough damage to actually kill the animal. That modern construction doesn't do that with bullet design. But you have to look at this a lot, because if you're shooting from a lot of high angles down to a certain area, you want the best ballistic coefficient you possibly can so that you actually get your hit where you need it to, because those distances matter, right? And how the bullet flies matters. And this is where you have to start thinking about those little weird things. This all factors into what you're trying to achieve with the load you're trying to build. And when you start talking about bullet construction, this is just one of those first phases of designing the round you're going to be manufacturing yourself. If you're looking for a purely self-defense round, like a pistol round, you need to, in my humble opinion, you need to develop two. You need to develop the one that you're going to use for self-defense and the one you're going to use for practice. Okay? It's usually cheaper bullet construction, but it mimics the accuracy the best you can, because, as I say this all the time when I represent Go Rogue, if the bullet costs $1.40 per hollow point, but your training round costs 11 cents, and you shoot a lot more training rounds anyway, wouldn't it make sense to use those to train with, so you get the same accuracy or close as you can to what you would pay or what you would use for self-defense. Because when the rubber meets the road, I still say test your self-defense rounds. Make sure that they run in your gun. Make sure that the accuracy is there, that your accuracy is there. But then find a training round that mimics it the best you can so that you continually train. Because whether you shoot long range, whether you shoot to hunt, or you shoot for practice, or you shoot for fun, and you are trying to do this for self-defense, because ultimately that's kind of where I'm at, you want to be able to train to that highest level you can. And you want to know what to expect each and every time you squeeze the trigger and it hits its target and what it affects. So those are what I would consider are the big highlights of bullet selection. If you have any questions, please talk to me. If you are a better expert than I am, remember I'm just some Goomba that's sitting behind a microphone talking about what I know. What I know is pretty extensive, but at the same time, it's not 100% perfect. And I would love to hear from my audience in any way, shape, or form, and I'm hearing from them more and more, where people are just saying, hey, man, thanks for the information. This is kind of cool. Like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, be great.